So the very first episode of Daredevil Born Again Season 2 just dropped, and honestly, one character completely stole the spotlight, and that is Mr. Charles. Not Daredevil, not even Wilson Fisk, because the moment Mr. Charles walks into the story, the tone of the entire season changes. And the crazy part is this: Marvel is clearly setting him up as someone much bigger than just another villain in Hell's Kitchen. This is a character who represents power on a completely different level. So, this video, I'm going to explain who Mr. Charles really is, what his comic book inspiration actually is, why he's connected to Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, and most importantly, why his presence might actually be worse for Fisk than Daredevil himself. What the show is really telling us about Mr. Charles. One of the biggest things fans noticed immediately is that Mr. Charles doesn't feel like a normal MCU villain. He doesn't talk like a crime boss. He doesn't act like a politician, and he definitely doesn't behave like someone who's afraid of Fisk. And that's because the show is quietly telling us something very important. This is a man who operates above all of that. From the moment we meet him, there's this calm, calculated energy. He's not trying to impress anyone. He's not trying to dominate the room like Fisk usually does. Instead, he speaks like someone who already knows he has control. And that right there is what makes him dangerous. Because Fisk controls New York, but Mr. Charles feels like someone who controls people like Fisk. That's the real message behind his introduction. The season wastes no time throwing us back into Matt Murdock's world after his time away, with Fisk now growing his influence through politics. But instead of Daredevil being the biggest threat to that power, it already feels like someone else is pulling the strings behind the scenes. Mr. Charles. His true identity in the MCU. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Mr. Charles isn't just a random character created for the show. He's introduced as a fixer connected to Valentina Allegra de Fontaine. And if you know the MCU, that's a massive connection, because Valentina isn't just another character. She's been quietly building a network across different parts of the Marvel Universe. So if Mr. Charles answers to her, then his influence goes way beyond Hell's Kitchen. And suddenly, Fisk doesn't look like the most powerful man in the room anymore. Watch their scenes closely. There's tension there. Not loud, not aggressive, but controlled. And honestly, that's even more dangerous because Mr. Charles doesn't need to challenge Fisk directly. His presence alone already does that. To him, Fisk isn't the king. He's just another piece on the board. And when you rewatch those moments, you'll notice something. Mr. Charles never tries to overpower the room like Fisk does. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't force authority. He speaks like someone who already knows he's above it. That's not confidence, that's control. Tash, the comic book history, and why Marvel is changing it. Now, when it comes to the comic book side of things, this is where a lot of people get confused. Yes, there is a Mr. Charles in Marvel Comics, but he's barely a character. He only appears once, tied to a corporate operation involving Roxxon. No big storyline, no major importance, nothing that would suggest he'd become this kind of presence. And that tells us something very important. The show isn't really adapting him. It's reinventing him. And Marvel usually does this when they want full creative freedom, when they're building a character who isn't limited by comic expectations. That's when things get unpredictable. Because instead of bringing in a known villain like Bullseye or revisiting the Hand, the show is building someone new. Someone who represents political power, intelligence networks, and manipulation from the shadows. So Mr. Charles isn't dangerous because he's strong. He's dangerous because he doesn't need to be. Why he's more important than Fisk this season. And when you step back and look at the bigger picture, you start to understand what this season is really about. Season 1 was simple, Daredevil versus Kingpin. But Season 2, this is about power. Fisk is trying to control the city through politics now. He's evolved beyond just being a crime boss. But the moment Mr. Charles shows up, it becomes very clear. Even Fisk might not be at the top anymore. Because if Fisk is the king of New York, Mr. Charles represents the people who decide who gets to be king. And that's a completely different level of threat. You can already feel that tension building between them. It's subtle, but it's there. And if you know Fisk as a character, you already know he doesn't tolerate disrespect, especially not when it comes to control. So this dynamic, it's not going away. If anything, it's only going to get worse as the season goes on. The real message of the character. But here's the deeper layer to all of this. And this is what makes the character really interesting. Mr. Charles isn't just a villain. He's a symbol of where this story is heading. The original Daredevil focused on crime in the streets, gangs, violence, survival. But Born Again is shifting that focus. Now it's about corruption at the highest level, and Mr. Charles fits perfectly into that world. He doesn't need to run a gang, he doesn't need to fight Daredevil, he doesn't even need to be seen that often, because he controls things from behind the scenes, information, decisions, power. And that's exactly why he feels so different from anything we've seen before. Because unlike most villains, we don't fully understand him yet. And that mystery, that's what makes him dangerous. Why he could become the biggest threat in the future. And looking ahead, this could get even bigger. Because of his connection to Valentina, there's a real possibility that Mr. Charles isn't just tied to Daredevil's story. He could be part of something much larger in the MCU. Think about it. Valentina has been linked to multiple major players and future storylines. If Mr. Charles is part of that network, then what we're seeing right now might just be the beginning. And that changes everything because Daredevil can fight criminals. He can expose corruption. But going up against someone who operates on a global level, that's a completely different fight. So when you ask the question, who is Mr. Charles in Daredevil, Born Again? The real answer isn't just a fixer. It's not just a government agent. He represents power beyond Fisk, control beyond politics, and a level of influence that Daredevil has never faced before. And if the show keeps building him the way it started, there's a very real chance that Mr. Charles isn't just another character this season one pulling everything together, maybe even the real villain behind it all. But here's something I want you to really think about before you click off this video. What if Daredevil isn't actually fighting the right enemy this time? Because everything we've seen so far suggests that Fisk might not even be the final boss of this story. What if Mr. Charles is just the beginning, and there's an even bigger system behind him? Because if that's true, then this season isn't just about taking down Kingpin. It's about exposing who really controls the game. And that's a fight Matt Murdock has never had to face before. So let me ask you this. Do you think Mr. Charles is the real mastermind of this season? Or is he just another layer hiding something even bigger? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it. And if you enjoyed deep breakdowns like this, not just recaps, but real analysis that actually connects the dots, make sure you subscribe. Because trust me, this story is only getting started.